Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I'm going to be reviewing my university's graphic design program. I did go to Loyola University, New Orleans. I am originally from New Orleans. I live about 30 minutes outside the city, and I currently now live in the city parish. So I went to Loyola for all 4 years. And it is a private Jesuit university. It's a liberal arts university as well. So that's just kind of a background about the university itself. But yeah, I'm just gonna review and kind of give my feedback and my experience at Loyola's graphic design program. So just to start, I did not start out graphic design as my initial major when I entered as a freshman. I was an international business major, so I was in a completely different college. And being an international business major was not my calling. I'm not supposed to switch based off of quizzes and stuff, but I took a quiz at the College of Business that kind of was identifying key things that I enjoyed and like what area of business maybe I was best suited to if I didn't know. And I didn't place in anything. I was just not interested in business. The highest percentile was creative production. I just remember it being the 70th. I was in the highest percentile of creative production, and I wrote down during that whole meeting, what about graphic design? So I was so confused, and I didn't think I was going to change my major, but I just didn't love where I was, and I didn't think it was the best for me. So I did a little bit of research. I found the graphic design program at Loyola. I thought there was only a fine arts program, but it so happened that the design department was its own department. So it was a little bit harder to find. It's a very small program. The largest, I think, art class graduated with 22 people. It's a very, very small program, but it can be smaller than that. And there's only 2 full-time professors. Usually, traditionally, there are between like 5 to 10, maybe even more full-time professors in the major or in the department as well. So yeah, there's only 2 full-time professors in the design department. So it is very small. I toured, and I initially have always wanted to go in fashion, but I didn't end up going to art school because it was just way too expensive. And graphic design seemed like the best option simply because it combined my love for creativity, and I can combine it with some commercial art that could potentially make me money in the future. So that's what my main concern was, being as strategic as possible for my future while also balancing out wanting to be a creative. And my mom was not the happiest, but she is so happy that I switched, and she loved the path that I chose, and she's very proud of me. I started as a sophomore in college, a second year, but I was taking first year classes in design. So I was technically behind a year from my graduating class until my final senior year. So the first year was just a lot of introductory classes, kind of intro to design, learning different programs like Illustrator and Photoshop. And we also did Typography 1 and 2 my first year. My intro class, probably the biggest thing I learned was the concept of iterating and the importance of it, and how not just going with your first idea all the time, and how to build off of that. I felt like the first year there was a big jump when it came to workload. You don't realize how much time studios take, and all my classes were considered studio classes. So I switched from business. In business, the classes were between 50 minutes to an hour and a half, and now I'm going to a class that is about 2 hours and 50 minutes, or almost 3 hours. So completely different. Studio time was really vital, but it was a huge change of pace. That's something to consider, is that I didn't know what to expect, and it was a lot of work that first year. I tried my hardest. I stayed up until 2 to 4 a.m. quite frequently my first year, and I felt as if there was some expectation to do that, to stay up that late and complete the work on time. And granted, I do think that submitting work in on time is a vital skill to have for any profession, and especially design. But I don't value staying up until 2 a.m. anymore. I will sacrifice grades later on in design for sleep. And that was just a personal choice, but I don't agree with the overproductivity side of design. I don't agree with the constant pushing out of content, of creation. And if you are unable to make it happen because of other schoolwork, I think that's okay, because you are in school. Granted, try your best and always try to turn things in on time, but I disagreed with that expectation, and I felt that was there a little bit in the beginning. Typography was probably my least interesting classes, type 1 and 2, but they were probably the most important classes to date. I think typography is just one of the hardest skills to master, to learn in general, and we kind of just take it for granted. I look at type so much more differently now, and I appreciate type. I analyze type at all times, even if I'm not designing anything. And I see some people in my graduating class who I just didn't love the type. Not saying it was bad, but I define my own niche of what I liked as type. So yeah, they were kind of boring at the time, but I think they were very useful classes, and I wish they transferred over into my second and third year in design. Typography 1 and 2 were only introductory classes, and they were only taught my first year. Yeah, my first year classes were like Intro to Design, Type 1 and 2, Print Design Narrative, which focused a lot on physical print items and designing off of concepts. Oh, I did like a photo class, a design photography class, which was really interesting. The key classes were my Intro to Design, my Type 1 and 2, and my Print Design and Narrative. I do think that my professors at Loyola in my first year really pushed me to think outside the box, which I really appreciated, but I do have to say it was a very tough year, and a tough introductory year. So moving on to my second year, I was technically a junior in college, but a second year design student. The main points of my second year were motion design and interactive design. So motion design will be the hardest class you will take if you are a design student or you want to become a design student at Loyola. But that being said, I think it's one of the most vital classes you take. My second year was probably the most emotional year personally. Personal things did happen that year with Spencer and I and his family, so it was a lot of dealing with that on top of my schoolwork. So kind of going into the two sectors of motion and interactive. I'm going to talk about interactive first because I don't have as much to say about the interactive side. Interactive classes, I took interactive 1 and 2. So interactive was, I think, could have been more interesting. I don't think it was the most interesting classes that I've taken, but I do think it's really important to know. I wish there were things that were explained a little bit more and not trial tested. I know some of the things that my professor did in my interactive classes were the first time that he had ever experimented with those, so I wish that wasn't the case. And I wish I kind of understood what interactive was while I was taking the classes. I understand a little bit more now, but I do have to say it wasn't as spelled out as I had hoped. It was a lot of exercises to try and spell it out rather than it spelling it out for us and applying it to different exercises. But yeah, that class I enjoyed. You could have become an interactive design major within Loyola's design department, but I just graduated with my general graphic design degree. Alongside of interactive, your second year, you take motion design, which motion probably was my favorite class to take. I took motion design 1 and 2. And when I say 1 and 2 of these classes, motion design 1 is your fall semester, motion design 2 is your spring semester. We did a ton of projects in my motion classes. My professor for that was fantastic. She graduated from SCAD. She's a badass. Really loved my professor. She's unfortunately not there anymore. But I do think it is probably one of the most underrated skills to know is After Effects. I learned so much from After Effects and Photoshop. That's basically all we used my second year. It was After Effects and Photoshop, and I produced some of my best work, and I put it on my portfolio today, and people still tell me how much they are impressed about my motion work, and it actually helped me land a internship, and that's all I did was a lot of motion work for that internship. It helps with social media, it helps with long form projects, it helps with pretty much everything. I have some of my pieces that I completed in motion on my website, so if you want to look at what I did in motion, you can see down below, and I'll link my website down below. But I do have to say, I do think there was still the stigma of constantly producing really good content in the way of like creating good design all the time. And granted, there were some people that stood out more than others. I really tried my best to be the best designer that I could, but this was kind of where I switched with stressing out a little bit less on school. I still stressed out a good amount, but I do have to say this was the transitionary period where I was like, okay, I'm gonna prioritize my health because my mental health is degrading, and if that's not doing well, I'm not gonna be a good designer. I focused a little bit more on my mental health this year, and I think that was one of the most important things that I could have done. But overall, motion design was really vital, really key. I think it stood out in the program. I think the professor that I had for that motion class was one of the best professors I've ever had. And I would say if you can learn motion design on your own, or if you find a program that has it, take it. It is so important. I think this would be the first time I was developing really good critiquing skills. So critiques are pretty much every single class. You're critiquing your work, you're analyzing it, you're getting feedback from your peers, you're getting feedback from your professor. Feedback and critiquing is some of the most important things as a designer, and being able to articulate what you want to have to say about why you like or dislike a work. And I feel like some people didn't take that to the fullest extent. I think the second year with my motion design professor, she really taught me how to critique very well and articulate what I have to say. I enjoy critiques. I don't enjoy when people have bad things to say, but being able to hear people say why they do or don't like my work or someone else's work is such a helpful skill, and it applies to not only design but in regular life. Being able to say, okay, I don't like this, and then explain why you don't like that is amazing. It's just good communication. It helps kind of clear the air of what your intentions are, what you're trying to say, and not just say, oh, I don't like this. Well, why don't you like this? So my second year was a really vital year in good critiquing skills, and kind of fine-tuning this designer eye. So critiquing, I think, also helps fine-tune that eye. And I think I really tried to delve into that. I appreciated the craft that was really pinpointing what good aspects were of being a good designer. So I think that was really vital of my second year of design, and that's what I really appreciated. Moving on to my third year of design was my senior year, but my final year in design. I should have done 4 years, but with the Loyola design program, you are able to complete it in 3 years. I did take 18 to 21 credits my first and second year of design. If you are able to not take that many credits, I would highly recommend not doing that. Taking 3+ studios a semester is very, very draining and something I don't recommend, but if you have to get it done, it is possible. I took 3 studios every single semester until my senior year, so it is very possible to get it done. Ideal? No. Possible? Yes. My final year of design was my easiest and my hardest year all at the same time. This is when I dropped down from 18 credits to 15 credits my fall semester, and then 15 to 12 my spring semester. So my fall semester was all about branding, kind of the ins and outs of branding, typography, kind of concepting. So something I think that lacked in the design department in general was the idea of concepting and coming up with a really solid concept. So that was something I've learned a little bit later in my design career, is how to concept and coming up with, what does this mean? What is the objective? What are some adjectives to describe this? What do I want this to look like? It's kind of a mission and a vision for what you want a brand or anything that you're working on as a designer to look like. And there were ideas planted in my brain first and second year trying to come up with that, but nothing ever where I was like, this is my concept and I'm following this concept, and if it doesn't co-align with my concept, then it doesn't work with what I want to do. So that's what helped with my branding class. This professor was one of the hardest professors I've ever had, the toughest, probably one of the harshest, but one of the best professors I've had. He kind of gave a no nonsense, no fluff type of feel, very different to a lot of the professors I've had in the past. He's probably most similar to my motion design professor and my print design narrative professor. Very blunt and very straight to the point and very yes or no, and probably pushed me out of my comfort zone the most. It was a very tough class for me. It was, I wasn't the shining star and I wasn't the worst student in the world, but it was just super tough. Branding is something that I've had to work on personally. I'm not always the greatest at it, but it's something I do appreciate and enjoy when I'm doing it, but it is really tough. The idea of branding is you are going into the mindset of your client. So you're able to take the vision that your client who comes to you to bring the visuals to life, you're able to step into their brain and make things happen and design something that they aren't able to visualize. And that for me is such an art form and such a practice. Some people have a knack for it for sure, but I do have to say it is like a really tough industry, but it is really helpful to know, and that class was very difficult. I know a good amount of people that didn't enjoy that particular professor, but I don't think he was bad by any means. I think he's vital to the program. He was a pretty fine dude. He had his ways, but he was good. My spring semester, my most important class was my final thesis. So this I have on my website as well. So my professor at the time, he comes up with a theme for the show that you're going to present your work at. You then must come up with an idea that is loosely based around that theme or directly associated with the theme. The theme this year was after. I decided to explore textile design. I was taking a textile design class my spring semester, so my previous semester, so my most recent semester, and I decided to create my own collection of textiles based off of this theme after, and the whole idea of this pandemic kind of traversing through time and how history repeats itself. I have my full thesis on my website as well if you want to look at my portfolio on my thesis. This was probably the first time I've had some autonomy when it came to what my project was. A lot of these projects that I completed during school were given to me. The prompt, the concept, everything was given to me. The final thesis was the first time where I decided what the prompt was and what the project was, and so that freaked me out a good amount. I would say that's something, this autonomous nature, where you kind of have say on the prompt and are kind of developing a concept, was still relatively new, and I think that's something that was lacking in the design department in general. So I felt like a lot of us students, us designers, really struggled on coming up with a solid concept and design for the after theme. So that is, I think, one big critique I would have of Loyola's design department. But within this, I really did think I was able to show some actual professional skills, and I really relied on my mentor at the time. She was a textile designer, or she currently is, and she really helped me with that in general. But yeah, my senior year and this past semester was probably my busiest and my least busiest semester. It was really difficult managing time, figuring out logistics, but I think that was kind of the whole point of it, was figuring out and really managing my time in general. I feel like that's something a lot of people didn't do. My opening show, I was super disappointed. So with coronavirus this year, the show wasn't gonna be like an opening show like it usually is. Usually there's about 200 people that come and visit and look around, and there's food and there's drinks and there's beverages, and like it's a really kind of a fun party. This year it was a little bit different. You can book tickets for people to come and see your work, and I kind of assumed that people would have all of their work up. It would be a really nice display of what you could do. And it was kind of the opposite, I would say. There were plenty of walls that were blank that should have been filled, and that weren't filled until the end of the week, which the show lasted only a week. And that first day, my boyfriend showed up, and I thought a bunch more people were gonna show up, but it was just my boyfriend for my show. So it wasn't just mine, it was everyone else in my graduating class. That was a little disappointing, and something I didn't know that was going on, and I had put a lot of effort into this, and I really wanted to showcase what I could do. And yeah, so it wasn't ideal and a little bit disappointing kind of to end that way with my senior year, my senior show, but I am very proud of what I did. So yeah, a little disappointing and a little lack of communication on that part. But yeah, that was my third and final year. Overall, so these are my overall thoughts. I think the design department is good, and something, if you're going to Loyola and you happen to come on design, I would highly recommend becoming a graphic designer and going through the design program. I don't know if people seek out the program like you would at SCAD or FITM or FIT or Parsons or like the new school, stuff like that. I don't think it's something people seek out, but I do think it's kind of a diamond in the rough. It is a really solid program. I think there are some tweaks Definitely a little bit more knowledge on the technical side of design. I think a lot of what Loyola did for the design department was a lot of creativity, how to boost that creativity and kind of like be as creative as possible, but I didn't always feel like I knew the technical side of everything, which I've learned on my own and from past mentors and internships, but that's something where I wish I knew more of. I'm just not as confident as I would hope coming out as a designer. Not saying I couldn't do it, but I wish I knew some more. Other than that, I think it's still really small and it's got some room to grow. Since my motion designer left, I think the motion department is a little bit lacking. So I hope that they revamp that. But I would say if you are interested in going to Loyola and you're interested in going into graphic design, I don't think you're going to regret it. I think you're going to have a really good time. It is such a good experience going to a liberal arts school and doing something creative. It gives you a little bit of an edge. I think being kind of a more well-rounded person, that was something I was worried about transitioning into a creative field after international business was, shouldn't I just go to a regular art school if I'm just gonna do something creative? I was thinking about transferring. Something one of my advisors told me was an advantage of going to a liberal arts school is you have this well-rounded nature alongside of the creativeness. So you're able to talk about religious, political, you can talk about books, you can talk about whatever you want to, because you're learning about those things in classes alongside of your creative design studios. So I do think that was really vital to the program, the fact that it is in a liberal arts school and that you are able to learn so much and apply that knowledge into your creative outlet. So I really enjoyed going and learning design. I don't regret it even a little bit. I am happy that I did what I did. I met Spence. I am able now to do what I love to do, which is be a creative. And I feel like in this next chapter for me, I am going to do something creative, whether that be for myself or for a brand. I highly recommend Loyola's graphic design program if you are going to Loyola University. If you're interested in being a graphic designer, I think it's really good for the university, and it's something that's been there longer than Tulane, which Tulane is the more popular school. They just introduced a graphic design program into their architecture program, but Loyola has had a graphic design program for much longer, so I think you will do really well in that program. So yeah, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. I'm happy to answer anything. And we're so close to like 230 subscribers, so thank you so much for subscribing. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and I will have a video for you guys next time. Bye.